First, to the important thing: fun, joy, celebration, dreams. So, a theme song. Okay, enough of the fun stuff. Let's get down to business. I'm definitely feeling this extrapolative tension, this tension to extrapolate. And that happened because I've been getting some synchronistic emails in my inbox. And I'm sure all of us have experienced this, but it's nice to have these subtle synchronicities from the universe, these subtle messages, in disguise of benign emails from people that I'm on their mailing list. And today I was listening to something because I got an email from Dabney Alex, and I'm on her mailing list as she was the woman who organized the Shades of Awakening Summit, online summit on mental health in 2015. And I listened to all of it, and it was really good. And I did talk to her once on the phone, and I wanted to utilize some of her services to try and start something, but then I ended up in the hospital, and then that was my really bad hospitalization. So anyways, I didn't. But I read her email, and before I get into that, because I'm really not into linear logical order at all, I just want to share that I was editing my last video and I talked a lot about reaching my dream of being back in California. And I didn't even mention, because I'm that forgetful, that I reached my hugest dream of all, which is to be medication free. And to be even more nonlinear, 2 weeks today, I will be home from California, because I'm taking the train, so it'll take about 2 days on the train. So 2 weeks from now today, I will be waking up at home. And so yeah, the biggest dream was really to taper off these meds, and I've been able to accomplish that. And I think that I feel a lot of the changes. And I could talk about the changes, and I have along the way, but perhaps just going through this year, it's easier to see the changes. And maybe now that I'm off the meds, it's going to be easier to be the change that I wish to be, as Gandhi might say. And so the messages I've been getting to my inbox are interesting because they're all about sort of speaking up. And Dabney shared that she listened to this TED radio hour about speaking up. And so I read her article, and how the first woman in that podcast, she speaks up about being queer in a country where basically you could be tortured for that. And so it's just interesting because at some point I will want to share, and I'm seeing that maybe I'll want to unfold some of this movement towards sharing, because it is challenging, and I could actually go out there and get someone to help me figure out what to share, what not to share, when to share, why not to share, etc., etc. Or I could just really unfold that for myself, which is something I've been doing all along, is just unfolding things for myself and moving into that understanding. Yet at the same time, we're all connected, so people send messages to each other, and whatever's salient we can pick up on. So I got a bunch of emails in my inbox, but the ones that were salient, like this one about speaking up, are more messages for me in what I'm moving towards understanding right now. And so Dabney included in her email a quote from Martin Luther King saying, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." And I've been framing this all along as something for myself, and it is. Yet at the same time, I am really hoping that it's something that I can share, or share some of it, to point to something, and I'm not really sure what that is. Maybe it's just speaking up to oneself for oneself and listening to oneself, and not really saying, oh, I need to speak up to others. So this is where I get a little confused, because in certain states I've seen everything as one and connected. So if I'm able to do this for myself, whatever this is, then maybe it will help others. And maybe by capturing it in this way, it will be more helpful to others. So I'm doing this for myself, but I'm capturing it also, hoping to share it at some point. And there's many reasons I haven't shared it yet. Partly because I know once I share it, I don't even want to finish that sentence. I don't even know yet. But the point is that I don't want to stay silent. And this is a way to definitely not be silent and actually amplify the non-silence by putting a lot on video and really kind of experimenting with myself and collecting a lot of evidence for myself about this process of self-dialogue and how that unfolding meaning for oneself can unfold a meaningful life. And so one reason I'm not sharing right now is I'm not back home, I'm not settled, and I can't really do anything that could be really stressful while I'm in another country. That wouldn't be good. So we'll see. I will know when it's the right time to share, but I still feel like unfolding some of the meaning around sharing as time goes on. And after reading her email and then listening to that TED radio hour, I just have so much to extrapolate. So I really feel this tension to extrapolate right now, even though I've been rollerblading in my dreams and my legs have been feeling a little bit restless, like I need to do some kind of physical activity. But I do want to just talk about some of this stuff because it's there and it's fresh, and I do have a lot. And I might just wait to edit some of these and just talk to myself on video and edit some of them on the train and just listen to myself unfold some of this. And I won't do that many videos, but today I'll do a few. So she talks about some mindset shifts to help us face self-doubt and saying your work is not about you. It was given to you as a vision by Spirit, and your job is to be an open, curious, and committed steward of your calling. And I feel like this self-dialogue has become my calling. I've made it into my calling by doing it. And I've talked about how we learn to walk by walking. We don't yet know how to walk, but somehow we walk and then we learn. So this is sort of my walking and learning, and I sort of realize more today, and I talk about this a lot with myself, that it's one thing to speak as and speak and unfold understanding, but it's another thing to actually move as that, to actually get up and make gestures that are congruent with the understanding that one has unfolded for oneself. And the trouble is in map consciousness, when we first get that powerful energy burst of so-called mania, is that we're trying to understand at the same time as the energy is moving us to behave or perform new gestures. And this is related to something that I learned in this TED radio hour. There was a man named Adam Galinsky on the TED radio hour, and he's some kind of social scientist, and what he said really expanded my mind. And things, when people say things and they expand my mind, it's usually expanding my own understanding of the framework I'm creating, but what they're saying fits into it somehow, because everybody's something fits into something somehow, I see. So it always can provide a lot of inspiration for extrapolation and building more of this understanding I'm creating for myself. And he talks about the range of acceptable behavior and how the more power we have, the more range of acceptable behavior we have. And I won't go into that exactly right now, but to me, that state of mania feels very, very powerful. And so it's no wonder that all of a sudden we're experiencing way more of a range of behaviors that we're capable of doing. And in that state, they all feel acceptable to us to some extent. And it's almost like we've done so many behaviors and gestures and movements in the moment and responding to the moment so quickly in such a powerful way in such a short period of time that we then start at some point to retract by thinking, this isn't acceptable. And that's sort of coupled with scary things, so unacceptable thoughts. So that's really complex. I don't really want to get into that because I can see a lot more just even when I say that. And that's not the direction I wanted to go. But I usually don't really correct the direction I go, but I'm trying to stay somewhat concise because I don't have a lot of time in these next couple weeks to talk about this stuff, and I want to get to the part that really was intriguing for me. So I'll talk about how the acceptable behavior, gestures, and everything feeling powerful and acceptable, as it retracts, everything feels unacceptable, and that is coupled with all these unacceptable thoughts. And then when those unacceptable thoughts come in, they could lead to so-called unacceptable behaviors, which actually could be sort of unacceptable. They could be bad, but really it's fed by the unacceptable thoughts, which are programmed into us through society. Like, that's not an acceptable behavior, that's unacceptable. I still feel there's something much more beyond this whole thought of acceptable and non-acceptable behavior. That's still putting a dualistic framework of ego retrospection on what we're doing. It's a correction, and it's still a different movement than what I would say, but it's still fascinating to hear what Adam Galinsky had to say. And then Dabney Alex said in her email, I'm definitely going to jump around a lot because this isn't about linear logic, it's about extrapolation and seeing, and it's infinite, so it doesn't really matter going from one bit to another. And she said, your work is not about you. It's about all those who stand to benefit, heal, and grow when you get out of your own way and fully step into your power and learn to express your message fully. And I feel like I want to express my message fully before I put it out there. And I'm doing that by unfolding it with myself. But there's definitely something that I would like to share at some point. So part of the reason I frame it about just me talking to myself, and if anyone just listens, it's just, okay, you're passively listening to me talking to myself. I'm not trying to help with anything. I'm not trying to do anything. And I'm not. What I'm talking about has this framework of either it's a mental illness, it's a medical problem, and I've had that label put on me, so I'm speaking from my experience and speaking myself through that experience of being labeled and then hopefully out the other side. But I'm not a doctor, so I can't give advice on a medical problem, but I can share my experience of being labeled with a medical problem when I feel and have shared and unfolded and extrapolated for myself thousands of different bits of meaning other than that. So it's actually sharing a movement away from just a pathologizing perspective, which I can share from my own experience why I feel it's not that. But I can't say, well, if it is that, you can do this to help yourself and that to help yourself and blah, blah, blah. And that's why I say, well, maybe it's not that. It's just a nutrient dependency. So now I'm supporting my nutrient dependency with micronutrients. So that's one of the reasons that I framed it that way. And I've also framed it that way because I'm talking myself into the reality of it being true. So just a month or so ago, I was still on the meds, so I would still have some belief in that paradigm, in that I'm still participating in it by taking its therapies and treatments. But now that I'm outside of that, it's a different story. And that's why I was almost thinking at some point I might just put this bit together and then start a completely new thing without any reference to that, and maybe not share the whole mental health bit, or maybe I will. I really don't know what I'm going to do, but I just feel like my brain is starting to integrate something and wants to share at a different perspective. I don't really know what that's all about, but this theme of sharing is coming up, and it also came into play because Adam Galinsky talks about when you share something, if it's advocating for others or it's to help others, it's more powerful. So this is kind of paradoxical for me because I'm saying, I'm not trying to help others, I'm just talking to myself. But maybe just talking to myself does help others, because nobody likes to be told what to do. Nobody really likes to be helped in ways that aren't helpful. And that's kind of part of the point too, is that when a person like me, I've been labeled with a mental illness, there's been many helpful things, but then there's also many unhelpful things that are just put on me. And then there's things that are helpful because there's no other forms of help. There's no other alternatives or options. There's no less invasive possibilities. So then the help is there as help, but it's maybe an invasive form of health, in that it's destroying my internal organs and just toxic on so many levels. So I really am spending hours a day doing this, not just for myself, but for other people, and just framing it in a way that really, it's about finding our own inner guide and helper, and learning from our own being and understanding. And when we understand something, our nervous system is able to make that part of reality salient for us. When we're only understanding according to our thought programs, we're always going to be moving in the salience of that. And it could be helpful for some period of time, just like taking medications can be helpful for a period of time. But the longer it goes on, it actually becomes detrimental. So if I stay on lithium for 20, 30 years, it's going to destroy my kidneys. So at some point, even if it is limitedly helpful, it becomes harmful. And so really, that's the part I'm trying to balance and have moved myself out of. So just with these messages coming to me about speaking up, like Dabney Alex sending that, and that sort of being a question in my mind, when to speak up or how. And then the TED radio hour was really cool to listen to, and I only listened to half because when I did get to the part about what Adam Galinsky was sharing, it was very fascinating to my brain. So it is nice to get special messages from the universe in a very benign form in terms of those emails to one's mailbox. And what really makes them special messages is our own understanding. And if we're not moving in our own understanding, our attention is on all these programs in our brain, and that's going to direct our attention on something else that maybe isn't that meaningful, but we've been programmed to make salient. So by unfolding our own meaning, we can actually make what is meaningful to us salient and available to us in reality, and we're not going to miss it. So in a way, synchronicity is not missing anything meaningful. It's moving from meaning to meaning to meaning to meaning. But in that really powerful state, it's almost like too much meaning. It's almost like being eventually in some kind of disordered state because there's too much meaning. So then we actually fall out of that and then possibly get medicated and numbed out, and then there's no meaning. So when we start again from that place of no meaning, can we still slowly unfold and find meaning? And even when you think about taking something like a psychotropic drug, it makes everything seem meaningful and connected and interesting and beautiful. We can do that for ourselves on a daily basis. We don't need to take something to get that state. And taking something to get that state could be useful to some limited extent, but it's then up to us to really keep going with that. We can do that with our own eyes and our own perception and our own brains and hearts. And I was talking about power with that Martin quote that I read in the last video, and I'll go on to that in the next video.